Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and we will be learning today, Mirz Hashem, Daf Chav Tes Amud Beis. We're continuing to learn Hilchos Kriyas Sefer Torah, the halachas that govern laning, and not just laning, but everything ancillary to laning. For instance, today we're going to be discussing Hagbah and Gelilah, etc., etc. We pick up on Chav Tes Amud Beis, second line down, in the Shulchan Aruch, right by the Eis Katan Hay for the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mechaber, Gadol sheba oisam shekaru b'Torah, the greatest one of the ones who had the aliyas to the Torah by the laning, Gelilah, he's the one who should do what the Mechaber refers to as Gelilah, which the Mishnah Berurah is going to say is what we call Hagbah. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Hay, a little bit down in the Mishnah Berurah here on Chav Tes Amud Beis. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Gadol, v'isa b'Gemara. The Gemara in Megillah tells us, the Hagolel, the one who has Gelilah, again, this is what the Mechaber calls Gelilah, says the Mishnah Berurah in the brackets, v'hu masha anu kairin hayom Hagbah. This really means what we call nowadays Hagbah, the one who picks up the Sefer Torah off the bima to show it to the tzibur. So, again, says the Mishnah Berurah, V'yisa Gemara, the Gemara in Megillah tells us the Hagolel v'hu masha anu kairin hayom Hagbah, the person who has Hagbah, shehu ikar Hagolel, who's really the main participant in the Gelilah. What does Gelilah mean? Gelilah means rolling the Sefer Torah closed. Now, how do we roll the Sefer Torah closed? So one person was Hagbah, he picks up the Sefer Torah. He shows it to the tzibur, then he sits down. Now the Sefer Torah is opened. Now the one who has Hagbah, together with the one who has Gelilah, rolls the Sefer Torah closed. Now the Mishnah Berurah tells us that the one who has Hagbah is the Ikar Golel. He's the main one who rolls the Sefer Torah closed, and that's why the Mechaber refers to him as the Golel. Now, how is it that he's the main one who rolls it closed? Very simple, because think about it this way. Who's actually holding the Sefer Torah? The one who had a Hagbah is the one who's actually holding the Sefer Torah. He's sitting down, holding the Sefer Torah. His hands are constantly on the Atzrichayim, on the handles, if you will, of the Sefer Torah, and he's rolling the Sefer Torah closed. The Golel, who we call the Golel, the one who has Gelilah, he's not holding the Sefer Torah. He kind of catches the top Atzikayim of the Sefer Torah, and he's really assisting in rolling the Sefer Torah closed. That's why the Mechaber refers to the one who has Hagbah as the Golel. Now, what's the point of the Mishnah Berurah here? The Mishnah Berurah is bringing down the Gemara in Megillah that says, again, v'isa b'Gemara da Golel noitel schar keneged kulan. He gets schar keneged kulan. He gets the schar, more schar than everybody. He gets equal schar at least to everybody who's in the Beis HaKnesses, who listened to the Kriyas HaTorah and everything else. Ulakach, and therefore, kedai shagadol yeh mechubed b'mitzvazu. That's why the Mechaber tells us that we should give this zechus, the zechus of Hagbah, should be given to the Gadol, kedei shehu yikabel haschar, so that he should be the one that's receiving this tremendous amount of schar, the schar keneged kulam. Now, there's an interesting footnote here in the Dirshu, footnote number 8. We're saying over here in the Mechaber that who's the one who's noitel schar keneged kulam, who's the one that gets the schar like everybody in the tzibur. That's the person that the Mechaber calls the Golel, who we call the one who has Hagbah. Says the footnote here, Omnam b'shem HaChazon Ish Huva, in the name of the Chazon Ish it's brought down, Shebizmanenu, nowadays, Divrei Gemara, noitel schar keneged kulan. Nowadays, that Gemara in Megillah that says that the Golel gets schar keneged kulan, misyachsin hein l'magbiyah v'hein l'Golel. The Chazon Ish actually says that Gemara refers to both the one that we call the one who gets Hagbah and the one that we call the Golel, the one who gets Gelilah. Just want to take a very quick look. Should have done this beforehand. This is bringing down the Gemara in Megillah on limud Beis Amud Aleph. Just want to see. I seem to remember a Rashi. Let's see. Limud Beis Amud Aleph. Limud Beis Amud Aleph. Hagolel noitel schar kulan. Okay. Salkedaitach schar kulan. Does he get the schar of everyone? The Gemara says no. Ela ema kibel schar keneged kulan. He gets the schar like everybody else. No. I thought there was a Rashi here. No. Okay. Very good. Weiter. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Vav. The Mechaber said that who do you give Hagbah to? You give it to the Gadol Sheba'oisam Shekaru B'Torah, the greatest one of the ones who had aliyas by the laning. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Vav. The Yesh Paiskim, there are those Paiskim that say the Gadol Shebebeis HaKnesses Gelilah. It's not the greatest one who had an aliyah. It's the greatest one in shul, even if he didn't get an aliyah. Ava Pisha Loikar B'Torah. V'chein Pasuk Agra B'Biurai, and that's what the Gra says in the Bir Agra. V'chein Pashat HaMinig Ka'yoim, and that's the widespread minig nowadays. She'ein Mechapsen Achar Misha Kara B'Torah. You don't find nowadays that the Gabbai goes to the people, looks at the people who had aliyahs, and then decides which one of the people who had aliyahs should go ahead and get Hagbah. No, he finds somebody new to be mechabed to get a Hagbah. So that's what the Mishnah Berurah means over here. He says, "V'chein pashat haminik kayom," like the Gra, not like the Gra that says that the greatest person in shul should get Hagbah. That we don't find that that's the widespread minig nowadays. But where the widespread minig does follow the Gra is that we don't bedafka look at the people who had aliyahs. We pick somebody for Hagbah from anybody in the shul, whether he had an aliyah or not. Ois Katan Zayin, Gelilah, the greatest one should get Gelilah, says the Mishnah Berurah, Zeu Me'ikar Adin. Me'ikar Adin, since the Gemara in Megillah says that Hagbah is so great that he's noitel schar keneged kulan, Zeu Me'ikar Adin. Me'ikar Adin, we should give it to the greatest person in shul. But v'achshav nagu, nowadays we're noig shaloy ledaktek bazeh, not to be careful about that. Umechabdin afla anoshim beinanim, and we even give Hagbah to, so to speak, a beinani. We don't give it necessarily to the greatest person in shul. We give it to a normal person. Mishum darkei shalom, and that's because of darkei shalom. We don't want to have a situation where it's only the greatest people in shul who are going to go ahead and get Hagbah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if you have two people who are chiyuvim, you have two people who have yahrzeit, and therefore they're supposed to get aliyahs, ve'echad ala HaTorah, and one of them got an aliyah, and you don't have an aliyah that you could give the second. Now this is very, very easy to happen, very easily understandable on a Monday or a Thursday. Let's say you have a Monday and a Thursday, and you have a Kohen and a Levi in shul, and you have two Yisraelim that have yahrzeit. You could only give one Yisrael, right? During the week, on Monday and Thursday, you're not allowed to make Kaisafis. So you're going to give one of the yahrzeits Yisrael. What are you going to give the other yahrzeit? So says the Chavetz Chaim, if two people, two Yisraelim, have yahrzeit on a Monday or on a Thursday, ve'echad ala HaTorah, and you gave one of them an aliyah, yesh lechabed hasheni b'Hagbah, give the other one Hagbah. U'mitzvos Gelilah afki rabahi. Now, as far as what we call Gelilah, says the Chavetz Chaim, mitzvos Gelilah, the mitzvah of Gelilah, which the Chazon Ish said, is equal to Hagbah, mitzvos Gelilah afki rabahi, even though it's nothing to be sneered at, the mitzvah of Gelilah is a great mitzvah, ki rabahi, it's a great mitzvah, na'agu lechabed af liktanim. Our minig is to even give a katan, a child under the age of 13, Gelilah. But what kind of cotton? Nagu lechabed af liktanim, even to ktanim, sheyesh bem das lahavchin inyan davar shebektusha. A cotton who's old enough and has enough understanding that he can discern and appreciate that he's being given the opportunity to do a davar shebekdusha. Not that this is just a fun thing, it's a cool thing, let's go do Gelilah. He understands, I'm going to the Sefer Torah, I'm doing something for the Sefer Torah. It's a davar shebekdusha, and he understands that there's value to a davar shebekdusha, because this is part of being mechanech children in mitzvos, to give them the opportunity to participate in the dvarim shebekdusha in the shul. Oid Kasav Sham, the Shar Ephraim also writes, She'ein askan rashoy lechabed b'mitzvos Hagbah lemi sheyadav roisisin harbe. The Gabbai, that's the skan, the Gabbai should not give Hagbah to somebody whose hands shake, or to an elderly person who is already weak. Because we know that such people are going to do a very fast Hagbah. They're going to pick up the Sefer Torah and sit down. And then, these people don't have the necessary kayach to hold up the Sefer Torah for a significant amount of time, facing the people, so that the people should be able to look well into the Sefer Torah during Hagbah. And we learned earlier that is a tremendous mitzvah to look into the Sefer Torah by Hagbah. Even you're supposed to look enough and close up enough so that you should be able to discern and read the letters of the Sefer Torah. And remember the Magen Avram that we learned that said that if you look into the Sefer Torah with an appreciation for the Kedusha, then there's an Or Gadol, there's a great light that could go into your nefesh, into your neshama, from looking in the Sefer Torah. So don't give Hagbah to somebody who's going to shortchange the tzibur because he doesn't have the kayach to properly show the Sefer Torah to the tzibur, and instead he's going to turn around and sit right down. V'gam, and also, ha'ishahu, a person who's weak or whose hands shake, tzarech limnaya nafshay mizeh. It would be proper for him to refrain from accepting the kibud of Hagbah. Ayin Sham. Now, says the Mechaber Viter, the last word on the second line here on Chav Tes Amud Beis, Uregilim liknoisai b'damim yikarim lechabev hamitzvah. He says that it would be, we are regilim, we're used to purchasing, putting up Hagbah for sale, and purchasing Hagbah b'damim yikarim, for significant amounts of money, great amounts of money, lechabev hamitzvah, to show the love that people have the mitzvah. In other words, Mishnah Berurah is going to speak this out. Instead of just giving Hagbah to the greatest person in shul, the minhag is to auction it off, and people should pay a lot of money for it. And then people see the value of a Hagbah, and it creates a chashivus. So now people will have love for the mitzvahs. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Ches, Uregilon Liknoisai. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Hainu after mitzad adin hagadol kaidem lemitzvazu. This means, even though we have just said that me'ikar adin you're supposed to give Hagbah to the greatest person in shul, kahayim nowadays mishum chibuv mitzvah, because of the love for mitzvahs, regilon liknoisai b'damim yikarim. People have become used to purchasing Hagbah for a lot of money. And we shouldn't be makbid. In other words, we shouldn't turn around and say, no, what? You think you're going to give $100 and you're going to get Hagbah? No, we give Hagbah to the Rav. We give Hagbah to the greatest person in shul. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. Let people buy it for money. V'hu kaidem lahagadol. And Adarabah, says the Chavetz Chaim, let the person who's spending a lot of money, let him get it and not the gadol. And he brings this down from the Magen Avram, V'ayin Bel Yerabah, Mashakasa Bazeh. And this is because of Chibuv HaMitzvahs. We want to show how beloved the mitzvahs are. V'im loy nimtza bebeis hakneses mishakana. If there isn't anybody who's going to buy it, v'hagabayim mechabdim la yashar be'inayim, so that then it falls to the Gabbai to give it to whomsoever they choose, then bevadai roy lahagabayim lechabed lagadol. Certainly the Gabbayim, if they're going to be mechabed somebody with Hagbah, they should be mechabed the gadol of the Beis HaKnesses. But if there are people who are willing to buy it, let them buy it and sell it to them. Furthermore, says the Chavetz Chaim, once we're talking about kibudim by the Sefer Torah, v'noihagin limkar hoitzais v'achnosos. The minhag is to sell hoitza, v'achnasa. In other words, create kind of a lot of kibudim. Sell to somebody the schus to take the Sefer Torah out, to put the Sefer Torah back. I have seen places where they're not mechabit somebody for hoitza v'achnasa. In those, hoitza v'achnasa really is redundant. What happens by hoitza v'achnasa? Somebody goes up to the Aron, takes out the Sefer Torah, and then what does he do with it? He doesn't bring it to the bima, he gives it to the chazan. The chazan brings it to the bima. So why not just have the chazan go up to the bima and take the Sefer Torah out, go up to the Aron and take the Sefer Torah out of the Aron? Why do we need a middleman? And indeed, I have seen places where that's what they do. They're not mechabit somebody for hoitza v'achnasa. The chazan goes up to the Aron, takes out the Sefer Torah, and then when it comes time to put the Sefer Torah back, instead of the chazan taking the Sefer Torah from the one who had Hagbah, walking to the Amud, and then at the Amud giving it to somebody else who puts it in the Aron, the chazan himself puts it in the Aron. But the Ramah, the Mishnah Berurah says over here, no. The minig is to sell a separate kibud of hoitza v'achnasa. Why? Mishum baravam hadris melech. Because you want to create more people that are involved with the Sefer Torah, more people that are being mechabed the Sefer Torah. Why? Because b'roivam, with a greater congregation, hadras melech. That's the glory of the king. In other words, it's a tremendous covered HaTorah. It's a greater covered HaTorah, and therefore a greater covered for the Bari Olam, to show that lots of people are coming to be involved in dealing with the Sefer Torah, dealing with the Kriyas HaTorah. Okay, now we have here an interesting Ramah, third line down in the Shulchan Aruch, middle of the line. Haggah. Yesh Oimrim. There are those that say. Now, what's apparent for what the Ramah is going to say over here, it's apparent that they used to cover the Sefer Torah with two different coverings. They had an inner covering, which we're going to refer to as the me'il, and then there was an outer covering. So says the Ramah, Yesh Oimrim, Im ha-me'il, if the inner covering, the inner cover that goes over the Sefer Torah, is b'tzad echad pishtan, if that me'il is made out of two fabrics, and the inside fabric is pishtan, flax, which is not such a linen, not such a beautiful fabric, u'b'tzad echad meshi, and on the other side it's silk, which is a nicer and a more chashuv fabric, tzarich lahapech ha-meshi l'tzad ha-sefer, you should turn it inside out, and you should put the silk inside, where next to the Sefer Torah itself, the ligloil, and roll up the Sefer Torah that way. I'm not exactly 100% sure what the mitzvos of this inner covering, the me'il, and the outer covering, I'm not 100% sure. It sounds to me like the me'il, the inner covering, was like a wrapping. So we just wrapped the Sefer Torah with a gartel. You know, when I was growing up, we had a gartel at the tie. Then later it became the fashion to have the gartel with a buckle. Now it became the fashion to have a gartel with Velcro. Then you have the minig, I think it's more of a Yekisha minig, where they have what they call the vimple, right? Which is a long, wide cloth, and they wrap it around. They wrap it and wrap it and wrap it and wrap it, and then tuck it in. Maybe that's what the me'il was more like that. And the Ramah is saying, if this me'il was made out of two fabrics, so that the one face was linen, pishtan, and the other face is silk, then you should turn it so that the silk should be on the inside touching the sefer, and the linen, the pishtan, should be facing the outside. Now this is very interesting. In a way it's counterintuitive. You might think that the more beautiful fabric should be facing outside, so people could see it. But remember, this is an inner covering. There's a mantle that's going over this. So what's at work over here? Why should you put the silk on the inside? So let's take a look here at a very interesting Mishnah Berurah. But first, let's finish the sentence in the Ramah. The Ramah says, Yesh Oimrim im ha-me'il b'tzad echad pishtan or b'tzad echad meshi. There's a Yesh Oimrim that says, if one face of the me'il is linen and the other face of the me'il is silk, tzarich la'apech ha-meshi l'tzad ha-sefer, you should put the silk face touching the Sefer, v'ligloil, and roll up the Sefer Torah that way. But the Ramah says v'loy noagu kain. But we're not noying that way. Now let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cut and test. The Mishnah Berurah says, Im ha'me'il, hainu ha'me'il ha'tachtoin, this is the inner covering of the Sefer Torah, shehu ha'mappa, which is the mappa. A mappa is a cloth. It's like a sheet. So it sounds to me like this is not like an inner mantle. It's not shaped like a mantle. It's more like I said, it's more like the wimple. It's more like something, a cloth, a flat sheet, a flat cloth, if you will, that you wrap around on the inside of the mantle, around the Sefer Torah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Di'ilu ha'me'ila elyon, because if we were talking about the outer covering of the Sefer Torah, so what we call the mantle, if we were talking about the mantle, then nobody would say that you should put the fancy side of the mantle, the silk, on the inside, and put the linen side of the mantle on the outside. Nobody would say that. Okay, again, we still don't understand what's at work here. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, V'tam b'chol zeh, the rationale behind all of this is since we're talking about an enclosure for the Sefer Torah, so lichatchila, we want to follow the model of the Aron Kodesh in the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash. What do we mean? What's the model of the Aron? Explains the Mishnah Berurah, shahaya mi bifnim mitzupazav. Let's remember that the Aron Kodesh had 3 layers. And the way Rashi explains it in Parshas Truma, it was made out of 3 boxes, 3 separate boxes. There was an outer box, which was made out of zahav, it was made out of gold. Inside the outer box, they put in an inner box, which was made out of wood. And then inside the wooden box, they put in a 3rd inner box that was made out of gold. So it was 3 layers. The outside layer was gold, the inside layer was gold, the middle layer was wood. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if you have a me'il, if you have 2 coverings on the Sefer Torah, there's an inner covering and an outer covering. What should be the innermost covering? The innermost covering should be a fancy covering, because the innermost layer of the Aron Kodesh was it was gold. So now, you have the me'il, the inner covering, if one side of it is meshi, which is fancy, and the other side of it is pishtan, linen, which is not so fancy, so put the silk on the inside so that the innermost layer closest to the Sefer Torah is a fancy layer, like the gold of the Aron Kodesh. Then leave the linen side facing out. That will become the middle layer, and the middle layer of the Aron Kodesh was wood. So it doesn't have to be so fancy. Now let's deal with the mantle, which is the outer covering. The outer covering, so the outside of the outer covering has to be like the outside layer of the Aron Kodesh. The outside layer of the Aron Kodesh was it was gold. So if the mantle has a fancy side and a less fancy side, let's say silk and linen, so now you got to put the silk on the outside so that the outermost layer should be a fancy layer. And put the linen side on the inside, that would be like the 8s. So it would come out that you would have silk, linen, linen, silk. So okay, so you have zav on the outside, on the inside, and wood on the inside. Very interesting. So again, so the Mishnah Berurah says over here, Di'ilu ha'me'ila elyon l'kol yamein lahapchai. The tam b'chol zeh de'be'ino lechatchila lasis dumyu da'arayin shaya mimifnim mitzupa zahav. Ice cut yud, but the Ramah said, "V'loy noag." Okay, we're not noig like this. You don't have to flip the me'il on the inside so that the silk is on the inside and the pishta is on the outside. V'loy noag. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah. Hinei Magen Avram Kasav. The Magen Avram writes to become makayim lechatchila toiv l'noig kain. Lechatchila, if you could be noig like the mechaber, be noig like the mechaber. Not the mechaber. I'm sorry. If you can be noig like this Yesh Oimrim, which is a Mordechai, if you could be noig like the Mordechai and put the silk on the inside and the linen on the outside, okay, toiv linen again. Ubibir agra hiskib la shulchan aruch da'isa deya ein le'ikr But he says that the Bir Agra is maskim v'loy nogu kain. He says la Shulchan Aruch. He doesn't mean the Mechaber, I guess. He means what it says. No, he means the Mechaber. Because if you look at the Ramah v'loy nogu kain, that's brought down from the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef is the Mechaber. So I'm sorry. V'loy nogu kain is not the Ramah. It's the Ramah's words over here in our print, V'loy nogu kain, but he's bringing it down from the Mechaber in the Beis Yosef. So the Mishnah Berurah says it would be Agra hiskim la Shulchan Aruch. In the Bir Agra, the Gra is maskim to the Mechaber. The Oisadeya ein le'ikr, that there's no need to flip the inside covering around so that the silk should be on the inside. Val kain, but since now it turns out that we have a Mordechai that says you should put the silk on the inside. We have a Beis Yosef who says that we don't have to be makbid. Valkain, yesh yekasru, there are those that write, a Baal Nefesh should avoid the Shaila. How should he avoid the Shaila? Yasemapa mishnei tzadim b'shaveh. Don't have an inner me'il that is made out of two fabrics, a cheaper fabric on one side and a more expensive fabric on the other side. Don't get involved in this machlokes, the Beis Yosef and the Mordechai. Make a silk mappa, make a silk me'il, or make a linen me'il, but make it out of one fabric. V'av shepishta be'emtza nami shari. Now, even though it's okay to have the pishtan in the middle, dumyu the orange, zavi bias umibachutz ve'etz be'emtza, still, it would be better make it all out of one fabric. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, another interesting halacha. Mapais, cloths, umitpakais, wrappings, mantlach, v'chena prusais ala shulchan, and also the bima cover, osir meklayim, you're not allowed to make them out of shatnez. So the Sefer Torah mantle, the covering of the bima, a mappa, a sheet that you wrap the Sefer Torah in, none of these things should be made out of klayim. None of them should be made out of shatnez. Now, many of you might be thinking right now, why is that? Why can't you make it out of shatnez? Oh, it must be like a covered for the Sefer Torah. Shatnez is a davar aser. Don't make it out of a davar aser. No. That's not pshat. Pshat is we're worried about the issur of shatnez. Why are we worried about the issur of shatnez? Because the Mefarshim say these are all items that a person might get physical pleasure from. How so? Well, maybe somebody's standing by the bima and laning. Now let's step out of our comfort zone. Let's imagine we're living in a very, very cold climate, and let's go back to the shtetl, and we're living in a very cold climate, and we don't have enough coal, or coal is very, very expensive, and we don't have good insulation, and it was always cold in shul. So it's 50 degrees in shul, or 45 degrees in shul, and I'm the balkaire, and I'm standing and I'm laning, and my hands are freezing. I might wrap my hands in the bima cover. If I wrap my hands in the bima cover, then I'm using the bima to derive physical pleasure. I'm using the bima cover to warm up my hands. That would be an issur shatnez. If the bima cover would be made out of shatnez, and I wrap up my hands to warm up my hands in shatnez, I'm being over the issur shatnez. If I wrap the Sefer Torah in a mappa, and I tuck my hands into it, I'm going to be over shatnez. If I'm carrying the Sefer Torah and I'm using the mantle of the Sefer Torah to help cover me and warm me up, I would be over the issur of shatnez. So therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, that this is a potential problem, and therefore, mapais with pachais v'chein aprusis al shulchan also meklayim. You're not allowed to make them out of shatnez. Avol paroiches, but the paroiches that's hanging in front of the Aron Kodesh, u'mashe menichin ba'aron, or things that we put, maybe if we put a beautiful fabric on the bottom of the floor of the Aron Kodesh, ve'in yoitzi im Sefer Torah, and we never take it out with the Sefer Torah, muter shaklayim. That's not a problem, because nobody is going to come to derive hana from those fabrics, and therefore it can be made out of shatnez. So there's no intrinsic issur in using shatnez for the Sefer Torah. The problem of using shatnez for the Sefer Torah is, don't use shatnez for the Sefer Torah in a way, in a format, that somebody might come to get physical pleasure from it and be over the issur of shatnez. Continues the Ramah. We're now 5 lines down in the Shulchan Aruch, beginning of the line. Ve'ein ligloil b'mapa akrua. we should not roll the Sefer Torah and wrap the Sefer Torah up in a sheet that is torn. Im yesh lo acher, if you have something else available to you that you could use. Says the Mishnah Berurah, or any of the wrappings or the mantlach. Don't use something that's torn. Even if it's new. You bought a new Sefer Torah mantle and somehow it got ripped. Don't use a ripped Sefer Torah mantle. The lav covered with teferis ula Sefer Torah, because that's not a covered for the Sefer Torah. That the Sefer Torah has a torn mantle. Continues the Ramah. 3 lines from the bottom, a little past the middle of the line, by the ice cut and Yud Beis for the Mishnah Berurah. Ve'ein lasois mapos l'Sefer Torah. This is a very interesting halacha. Ve'ein lasois mapos l'Sefer Torah. You're not allowed to make wrappings for the Sefer Torah. Midavarim yeshanim, from old used things. Shenasu behem davar acher l'tzarich hedyet, that we used previously for a non-kedusha use. So you have maybe even a beautiful blanket. Somebody had a very nice, maybe it's even made out of silk, a silken throw that they used to wrap themselves in. And now we're looking high and low for something to wrap the Sefer Torah in, and somebody says, here, you can take my silk throw, and you can use that. Now, this guy used this throw for 5 years when he was sitting on the couch, being Mavisedra Friday night in his house. He would wrap himself in it. Now he's donating it to use it for the Sefer Torah. Says the Ramah, you can't use that. Ein lasos mapos Sefer Torah. You don't make wrappings for the Sefer Torah midavarim yishanim, from old items shenasu behem davar acher l'tzarich hedyet, that we used for hedyet purposes. Vayla kaman Siman Kuf Nun Gimel, and he points us to look later on in Siman Kuf Nun Gimel. Now let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Yud Beis. Ve'ein lasos, you can't use for a tashmish kedusha. You can't use to wrap the Sefer Torah something old that was used l'tzarich hedyet, that was previously used for a non-kadosh use. Shein zed derech kavod, says the Mishnah Berurah. That's not hakavodik. It looks like the Sefer Torah is getting seconds. The Sefer Torah is getting used items. This guy had a beautiful blanket. Now he wants to buy a new blanket. He wants to buy a new throw. I'll give my old throw to use for the Sefer Torah. But the Sefer Torah is getting from the Salvation Army. It's getting from the thrift shop. The Sefer Torah. That's not pakavodik. Shein zeh derech kavod. But b'diavad im asa'on. Let's say somebody gave his silk throw to the Sefer Torah, and you wrapped the Sefer Torah up in it. You weren't supposed to, but you did. Mitzaded El Yerabah, the El Yerabah takes the position she'ein lesser. If it was done already, we're not going to forbid it. Umiu al kol panim zevadai, but one thing is for certain, Shem asoi, that if you did use it, v'nishtamish ben l'kedusha, you used it for a davar shebekdusha, you used it to wrap up the Sefer Torah. Also l'hoirid v'lasis ben tashmish to tashmish. You can't lower it in status. In other words, so let's look at it now all together. You have the old throw, you don't use it for the Sefer Torah. No, that's not pakavodik. You're giving the Sefer Torah second-hand items. You don't do that. You did, and the Gabe forgot the halacha, so he took it, and he used it. So now it was elevated to the status of a tashmish kedusha. You wrapped up a Sefer Torah in it. Now you go and you remind the Gabe of the halacha. Is he mechuyev to say, we're not allowed to use it anymore? No, that's what the Mishnah Berurah just said over here. He said, b'diavad, if you went ahead and you did use it, imason, the El Yerabah says, you're not going to forbid it. You're not going to say, no, you're not allowed to use it anymore. And then also the Mishnah Berurah says, this much is for certain. If you elevated it to the status of a tashmish kedusha, because you did wrap the Sefer Torah in it, now you cannot lower it in madrega and use it as a tashmish to tashmish. A wrapping of the Sefer Torah is a tashmish kedusha. You used it for the davar shebekdusha itself. You used it for the Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah is a davar shebekdusha. Tefillin are a davar shebekdusha. A mezuzah is a davar shebekdusha. You wrapped up the Sefer Torah with the blanket. You made the blanket a tashmish kedusha. Now you want to go ahead and you want to use it as a paroiches. A paroiches is not a tashmish kedusha. A paroiches is not used for the Sefer Torah itself. A paroiches is hung in front of the Sefer Torah, in front of the Aron. The Aron is used for the Sefer Torah. You put the Sefer Torah into the Aron, so the Aron is a davar shebekdusha. The paroiches is a tashmish. So the Aron is a tashmish kedusha. It's used for the davar shebekdusha itself. The paroiches that beautifies the Aron is a tashmish detashmish. That's a second tier. It's a tashmish of the Aron Kodesh. The Aron Kodesh is not a davar shebekdusha. The Sefer Torah is a davar shebekdusha. So the Sefer Torah is the davar shebekdusha. The Aron is the tashmish kedusha. The paroiches is a tashmish detashmish. So if you went ahead and you took an old blanket and you used it to wrap a Sefer Torah, so now the blanket is a tashmish kedusha. Now you want to hang it in front of the Aron and lower it in status from being a tashmish kedusha to a tashmish detashmish? Not allowed to do that, because you're only allowed to elevate something in status, not demote it in status. Ois cotton yud gimel. The Ramah said you can't make mapos l'sefer Torah. You can't use for a tashmish kedusha, like a wrapping for the Sefer Torah, something that was previously used for a tzarech hedyot. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'hu adin l'chol tashmishay kedusha. This halacha applies to all tashmishay kedusha she'ein nasin midvarim shenishtamish ben mitchilu l'tzarech hedyot. You're not allowed to take something that was used for a tzarech hedyot and use it for a tashmish kedusha. Kamavur l'kaman b'simin kufton gimel sif chav b'lashon ha'mechaber v'chein kasva achronim. Now this shaila, I was somewhere where this shaila came up. How did this shaila come up? Somebody had a beautiful armoire. So somebody had a beautiful oak cabinet, an armoire, one of these 6.5 foot tall bed from a bedroom set, an armoire with 2 doors, and maybe it's like this one was 2 tall doors on top. So you can imagine that the top section of this armoire is a good 4 feet tall, and then on the bottom it had 2 drawers. Now somebody had this in his bedroom. For 10 years, somebody had this in his bedroom. It was a beautiful piece and a beautiful condition and everything else. Now there was a bungalow colony shul that needed an Aron Kodesh. They were using an old Tzahakta piece for an Aron Kodesh. Bacharim knocked together, they bought sheets of plywood from Home Depot, and they knocked together an Aron Kodesh, and they hung a paroiches in front of it. So this fellow came, and he said, I'm getting a new bedroom set. I have this old bedroom set. I have a gorgeous oak armoire. Take out the shelves from the top section, and you could put Sifrei Torah in there. So here's a beautiful Aron Kodesh. Put up hooks, put up a curtain rod on the front of it, and you'll hang a paroiches, and you have a beautiful Aron Kodesh. No. An Aron Kodesh is a tashmish kedusha. You're not allowed to make a tashmish kedusha out of something that was first used l'tzarech hedyot. You're taking an old bedroom set, and now you're giving it to the Sefer Torah to use it as an Aron Kodesh, to use it as a tashmish kedusha? What? The Sefer Torah gets secondhand goods? You can't do that. That's mamish dis shaila. So says the Mishnah Berurah. That's what he says. V'hu adin l'chol tashmishay kedusha. This applies to all tashmishay kedusha. She'ein nasin midvarim shenishtamish ben mitchilu l'tzarech hedyot. You can't use for a tashmish kedusha something that was originally used for a tzarech hedyot. However, l'tashmishay mitzvah, you want something that's used not for a davar shebekdusha like a Sefer Torah, something that's used for a dvar mitzvah, like a talus. A talus is not a davar shebekdusha. A talus is a garment. It's a 4-cornered garment that you put tzitzits on. We wear a talus l'chvoid tefillah. We wear a talus by davening, but that's a dvar mitzvah. It's not a dvar kedusha. A talus bag is a tashmish mitzvah. It's not a tashmish kedusha. A tefillin bag is a tashmish kedusha because tefillin are a davar shebekdusha. But a talus bag is a tashmish mitzvah. That's tashmishay mitzvah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, tashmishay mitzvah. Going kiss talus, you have a beautiful pouch that was used for a davar, for a tzarech hedyot. It was used for non-kedusha use, and now you want to elevate it for a tashmish mitzvah that you're allowed to do. Really, even a talis. If you have a big, beautiful, four-cornered garment that was not used for a talis, I don't know what it was used for, but it wasn't used for a talis. Now you want to make a talis out of it, you're allowed to. Miu mitashmish meguna. But if you have a fabric that was used for something, not nice, kigoin michnasayim. Somebody had a beautiful pair of pants. It was made out of a beautiful fabric. He had a beautiful pair of pants. And now he wants to cut it up to make a talus, to use the fabric for a talus. No, nearer the inlasas. The Pri Megadim says that wouldn't be right. Because of a Taz B'Yordei Siman Reish Pei Beis. The Taz writes in Yordei Siman Reish Pei Beis. Dafka tashmish kedusha aser. The only time you're not allowed to use something that was used l'tzarich hedyet is for a tashmish kedusha, aval tashmish to tashmish shari. You want to use something that was used for a tzarich hedyet. You want to use it for a paroiches, which is a tashmish to tashmish. That you're allowed to do. But the Magen Avram takes issue with that. If you have another reason to be mekel, b'vadei l'hachma b'zeh. Kasav Magen Avram, the Magen Avram writes, Davke k'moy shehein asel l'hishtamish ben l'kedusha. This that we say, that you're not allowed to use something that was previously used l'tzarech hedyet for a tashmish kedusha, that's only if you're using it the way it is. So like the armoire for the bedroom set. You're taking the armoire and you're using the way it is to use it as an Aron Kodesh. That you're not allowed to do. Avalim shina tzurasan. But if you change the whole tzura of the piece, and you make something new out of it, something different out of it, shari. So I would think that in the case of the armoire, let's say you went ahead and you rebuilt it. Maybe you took the doors off and you put on new beautiful doors and new beautiful handles. So you took something that was an armoire, but now you're building it into an Aron Kodesh. I don't think changing the handles would be enough. But you put on new doors, maybe you sand it and refinish it, you put on beautiful new handles, so now you're building it out into an Aron Kodesh. Even though he says there are those about the Yehuda, the Sefer V'Shav Koyin, that are machmir even in that case, the Welt is noig to be mekel. Ice cut Yudalid, the bottom line here in the Mishnah Berurah, midvarim yishanim, you're not allowed to use old things that were used l'tzarich hedyet. Says the Chavetz Chaim, mashmeh mizeh, the implication of these words is that when is it a problem? If you're using an old thing that was used l'tzarich hedyet. So you have an old bedroom armoire that was used l'tzarich hedyet. You used to keep clothing in it. You used to keep whatever in it. But let's say somebody bought a bedroom set and there never was room in the bedroom from the armoire. So the armoire was never used. It sat in the garage. It was never used. Shari. Then it's mutter. You bought it as an armoire for a bedroom set, but it was never used. Even though the Magen Avram takes the position that even new items, so long as it was made l'tzarech hedyet, it's forbidden. If somebody is mekel in this, you can't object. Mashma mikama achroinim, that you could be mekel. Okay? Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This is limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshua's for us, but also Shaduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the B'Yisrael Tzedek. B'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.